Good morning and welcome to today's local government education program provided by University of Illinois Extension. My name is Lisa Merrifield and I'm a Community and Economic Development Specialist with Extension. Before introducing our topic and our presenters today, we have a few housekeeping items. For sound quality, we will mute your microphones during the presentations. If you have any technical issues or questions for the presenters, please put them in the chat space. I'll monitor the chat space throughout and I will relay questions to our speakers at the end of the presentation. Please also note that you will receive slides, links to resources, and a recording for today's webinar following completion. Today, we are discussing the Corona Relief Fund Assistance Program for local governments. Our featured speakers are Philip Keshen and Anthony Rolando from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Tony Rolando is a Senior Account Manager for Dceo's North Central region, and Philip Keshen is the Chief Financial Officer for Dceo. Before we get started, we would also like to welcome back Kelly Murray and Taylor Anderson from the Illinois Association of County Board Members. They will provide a quick update. Kelly and Taylor, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this beautiful and sunny, sultry Friday. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to the University of Illinois Extension for once again partnering with our association to make available these timely COVID-related webinars. I know many of you have expressed to me the value of these sessions and the guidance our esteemed team of experts have provided during the pandemic. As is the case today, you're going to get some very valuable information with respect to the new state program. So we will continue to communicate and share information through these webinar sessions as this health emergency evolves. As you all know, the federal government's Phase 3 aid package, the CARES Act, was signed into law in March. State and local governments across the country split $150 billion in federal aid under a provision of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So today we're going to be focusing on Illinois' local government relief provisions, so the flow down through the recently announced Local Cure program. This applies only to local governments outside of the 500,000 population provision provided in the CARES Act, which in Illinois, that provided direct funding to Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, and Will counties. So today we're going to be talking in retrospect to the flow down to the other counties in the state. Our association, as you know, has a great working relationship with the governor's office and Dceo. Dceo is one of the main state agencies that work with county governments and other units of local government throughout the state. So we began holding discussions with, state lawmakers, the General Assembly, through them, the governor's office early following the federal action to offer our recommendations on the process for distribution of funds to the units of local government. One of the strongest positions we took in order to ensure kind of a fair distribution schedule was to allocate the funds on a per capita basis, possibly through a current formula recognized by the state. So I'm happy to state today that our recommendation was supported by the governor's office and the state agency directors. The Local Cure program, which you'll hear about today, allocations are recognized. They recognize the local government distributive fund formula as established by the Illinois Department of Revenue. So our presenters today will provide more detail on that. I just want to again thank Dceo for their good working relationship with our organization and the effort they put forth to put this program out very quickly. So I'll conclude by saying, we recognize there are going to be some added opinions and further concerns coming from local governments since the release of the emergency rules by Dceo. We know Dceo, we work with them well enough to know that we know there'll probably be some additional information coming out on this program. And also they are receptive to the feedback we're here to give them today. So we're going to continue to communicate with Dceo and the state leaders as the Local Cure program and the support for that evolves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our legislative consultant, Taylor Anderson, to share his comments and introduce our first presenter. Taylor?
Thanks, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be brief. Thank you for joining this call today. Glad that Extensions and Dceo could put this together. We think it's incredibly important that this information start getting out there and you all get up to speed as things start to move with CARES and with cures. I want to just echo Kelly's comments real quick that this is a partnership between state and local governments, as well as with the federal government. And so in spirit of that partnership, we know that there's going to be a lot of questions. Dceo has been gracious enough to offer their time to walk us through and answer some of these questions. And we hope we can continue in that partnership spirit, both with, moving forward and in the tone of the questions. So again, thank you everyone for joining today, and look forward to very productive.
Great.
So I'll turn it back over to Lisa. Thank you.
Okay.
Oops, can we make sure everybody's muted? All right. Tony, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Tony Rolando. I'm the North Central Region Manager for Dceo. That's basically an area that covers from Fulton County to McLean County and from Livingston to DeWitt County. I'm the boots on the ground fellow for this section of the state. I felt when Kathy Brown called me, I thought it would be very important for us to do this seminar to talk about the CURE program, because there are a lot of questions about it. So I asked our CFO, Phil Keshen, to set in today and to lead a program and a PowerPoint about CURE, and you'll be able to ask questions and find out and answers to any questions that you will have in this program. So I'm going to turn it over to the Department of Commerce Chief Financial Officer, Phil Keshen. And I hope Phil's there.
So my name is Phil Keshen. I'm the CFO for the department, and I'm here to talk about one of our two coronavirus relief fund programs, the local coronavirus urgent remediation emergency support program, or local CURE. As I said, it's a coronavirus relief funded program, and as mentioned before, it is targeted for local governments only. I think it's important to start off by speaking about the coronavirus relief fund in total. It was passed as part of the CARES Act in Section 5001. The coronavirus relief fund has specific purposes associated with it. The CARES Act requires that payments of CRF are only for things that are necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus were not accounted for in the budget most recently approved on March 27th, which is the date of the CARES Act, and were incurred during the period of March 1 through December 30th of 2020. I'll be passing out this PDF document afterwards. So as I go through and I click on various links to point to different resources, I encourage you to take a look at the PDF and do the same. So the first resource is the U.S. Treasury website. I suggest going here to read about the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and towards the bottom, the U.S. Treasury has been regularly putting out new frequently asked question documents, and the department is going to point to those documents as it relates to individual claims for reimbursement. And so it's important to keep those top of mind as you are developing your reimbursement program. The U.S. Treasury has said that the non-exclusive examples of CRF use is for medical expenses, public health expenses, payroll expenses for public safety, public health, healthcare, human services, and similar employees when their payroll and their role was substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID-19. And the department sees substantially dedicated as they're doing at least 50% of their job is doing some sort of response to COVID or the public health emergency or helping with public health altogether. Other allowable uses of CRF is expenses of actions to facilitate compliance with COVID-19 public health emergency, expenses associated with the economic support in connection with the COVID-19 health emergency, and then any other related expenses that are reasonable, necessary to allow a government to function as usual during this time. Now that's the allowable use of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And the Coronavirus Relief Fund was allocated to Illinois for $4.9 billion. And I put up the different distributions here. So as mentioned earlier, Chicago, Cook, Kane, DuPage, Lake, and Will all received their individual allotments. And then the balance of the allotment was for the governor's office and the General Assembly to decide how that last $3.5 billion is split up of the fund. So the General Assembly and the governor, they passed a package, an assistance package through the appropriations. There are a number of programs that were created in the budget implementation bill, and there are a number of programs that were appropriated and are appropriated to different agencies to support different efforts in the state's battle to COVID. And that the sum of these different programs all together makes up the assistance and the outreach and the recovery efforts that the state is putting on all together. Some of the programs that are appropriated is ones that are headed up by our emergency management agency. They are reimbursing the costs of other state agencies. That includes our contact tracing programs statewide and other public health, the overall public health response of our Illinois Department of Public Health. It comes from appropriations that are funded through the Emergency Management Agency. The Department of Revenue is sponsoring a rental and mortgage assistance program, which is through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. The Department of Human Services has a program to help mental health, substance abuse, and other counseling services during the pandemic. Healthcare and Family Services, they have a pandemic stability payments for healthcare providers program, and that makes sure that hospitals and healthcare providers have consistent payments throughout the pandemic. And then Dceo was appropriated for two different programs. A program that I'm here to talk about today, which is to support local governments, and then a different program that is the economic support component of the package, Business Interruption Grant Program. Now, there's a lot of information about these individual programs that the Governor's Office of Management and Budget released, and I linked it here, and when you receive this PDF, you'll be able to navigate through this release that the Governor's Office of Management and Budget put together. And the first few pages, it talks about the coronavirus relief statewide, as well as other items that were passed in the CARES Act that are related to the state's response to COVID-19. And you can flip through here on your own time and take a look at what's available out there and look at the appropriation levels and the details. And I urge you to reach out to those individual departments to learn more about these individual programs. So looking at Dceo's programs, like I said, we have two programs that are appropriated for the Coronavirus Relief Fund response, and I've linked in the PDF the different public acts as well as the enabling legislation for the programs. And the two programs are $250 million for the local cure program, which is what I'll speak in detail about today. And the other program is a $636 million assistance program for businesses, the Business Interruption Grant Program. Half of the business interruption funds are for small businesses, and they will be administered by Dceo. And if you want to learn more about those releases of funds as they happen, please visit illinois.gov/Dceo. Or if you have recommendations or thoughts or want to learn more about the program and have a conversation with our folks that are on the ground with it, please email us at ceo.big@illinois.gov. The statutory language for the Business Interruption Program also allotted half of the funds for child care services in Illinois. That way folks can get back to work and not have to worry about child care. And child care facilities all throughout the state have to abide by special social distancing measures, and that's being headed up by the Department of Human Services. They're partnering with us, and their partner, INCRA, are helping put on that program. And information about that program is linked in here as well. I'm going to click on it so you can bring it up. And the program, their half of the program is called the Child Care Restoration Grant Program. and it's taking a moment to load. But all the information you need to know about that particular program is right here on this website. The open application period is starting very soon. Applications will be open as soon as July 20th, and I encourage folks to look out there for more information about that program as well. So going back to the non-exclusive list of expenditures for Coronavirus Relief Fund, and looking at the two Dceo programs that we have. We have a $636 million program that's for business interruption, and $250 million that's for local government reimbursement. And we see the non-exclusive list of allowable expenditures as relating to either one program or the other. We see costs of local governments that are related to medical expenses, public health, payroll, other actions that the local governments had to make in order to comply with various COVID-19 public health measures and orders. Those sorts of expenses, as well as it's a non-exclusive list, as well as really any other expenditure that your government has had to incur due to the public health emergency. We're funding that through this local CARE program. And the other item that is allowable use of CRF is expenses related to economic support. The state is trying to provide a unified front for economic support, and that's why 72% of DCEO's programmatic dollars is towards economic support in the Business Interruption Grant Program. So once again, if you go to illinois.gov/DCEO and click on BIG, or email us at ceo.big@illinois.gov, you can learn more about the programs and the scheduled releases for those different individual grant programs, as well as helping give us your thoughts on what's best for your community and how you'd like to see the funds used. So focusing strictly on local CURE at this point, local CURE is a local government assistance program for counties and municipalities, any unit of local government based on the Illinois Constitution's definition. The Illinois Constitution says that it includes counties, municipalities, townships, and special taxing districts, units designated by units of local government by law, which exercise limited governmental powers or powers in respect to limited governmental subjects. But it does not include school districts. And that's part of the Illinois Constitution's definition for a local government, and that's the one that was put into statute for this program. One of the things that we keep getting questions about is what sort of expenditures can be covered in the program. And we put together this reimbursable expenditure test. And if you are thinking of an expense and can say true to everything on this list, it's something that the state is going to support in reimbursing. We're trying to find ways to fold in those expenses that you have incurred, and through this checklist, you could kind of make a self-assessment on whether those expenses can be covered or not. But you're also welcome to email us on those specific questions. I've already responded to some emails based on eligible expenses. So running through the reimbursable expenditure test, the expense needs to be connected with the COVID-19 public health emergency. The expense needs to be necessary. And we have necessary in quotes there because it is going to be up to the local government to attest that this was a necessary expenditure. We're going to defer to you to say that, yes, we had to incur this expenditure in order to respond to this disaster. The expense, it cannot account for a shortfall of revenue. So you cannot submit a request for reimbursement because you were short on your general fund. We are hoping that Congress will pass an additional aid package at some point soon that will account for governmental shortfall in revenue, but that's not this one right now. The expense needs to not be funded through another budget line, allotment, or allocation as of the date of when the CARES Act was passed, March 27th. The expense is not also being reimbursed through a different emergency response program. I'll actually take this moment to mention Eema is funding the public assistance program, which is funded through the federal Fema dollars. folks might be interested how this program relates to that one and how the two might be connected in some way. We will be going through a reimbursement process here, and we will ask to confirm that you're not seeking reimbursement for the same expenditure under that other program, and so we're not double counting. We need to make sure that the expenses that you're being reimbursed for are not double counted. But one major takeaway that you can take for the local cure program is dollars that you receive from the local cure program through a reimbursement can be used to match the public assistance award that's given by Eema. And we will be passing out additional information on how that exactly looks as we move forward. We've been working with Eema over the past few weeks to set up a process to make sure that we're communicating about those expenditures as they come in. Other items that need to be attested to true are the expense wouldn't have existed if not for COVID, or the expense would have been substantially different. So thinking back to that budget line, if you had dollars that were earmarked for a festival, but then suddenly those dollars that were earmarked for that festival now have to be used to putting up plexiglass in areas to help shield your employees from the public that comes in and help adhere to different social distancing guidelines. Those are things that could be incurred. Also, the expense needs to be accounted for on an accrual basis from March 1st to December 30th. And that means that the period of service for the goods or the services need to be within that period. And we'll be accepting reimbursements. We are seeking to get those reimbursements sent to us no later than January 31st of 2021. And that is just, the month after the last expenditure that can be incurred. And we'll be working with you to make sure that we're getting those lasted expenses, especially around the holiday. A lot of people are out of the office. So, the close down of the program is very much going to be a moving target. We learned of new guidance from the feds on June 30th on costs incurred and when and how late we can claim those for. And so we will be attributing the program to costs all the way to December 30th and looking to close out the program with reimbursement shortly thereafter. So looking at the basics of local cure, once again, we're going back to that not exclusive list of expenditures, but now we're looking at ones that are related to local cure itself. We're looking at reimbursing medical expenses, looking at reimbursing public health expenses related to COVID. An item that I see as a low-hanging fruit for local government is actually payroll expenses. This is a way that local governments can really be made whole on expenditures that you've had to make during this time. So if you have an entire unit that's dedicated to public health, that entire unit can claim their payroll expenses from March 1st all the way to December 30th. If they were working and responding almost entirely dedicated to COVID-19, they can also claim their expenses. So for example, right at the start of the stay-at-home order, we had a lot of police officers that were having to respond to closures and making sure that folks were abiding by the stay-at-home order and might have had to go out and do some public engagement on COVID-19. So when you have your public safety officers that are responding to COVID-19 and they were substantially dedicated at mitigating or responding to it, as long as your village, city, or county can attest to that, those will be accepted as expenditures under the program. We are also looking to accept expenses for actions taken to facilitate compliance with different orders that were put in by the governor or recommendations that were given by different public health officials. So those are pretty broad, but you could think of different things that you might have had to incur expenses for related to that. And if you go back to the eligibility test and think through this checklist and you could say true to each one, in most cases we're going to accept it. I also recommend going out to the U.S. Treasury's frequently asked questions list because there's a lot of answers that they've given on expenses that might have been necessary to facilitate compliance with COVID-19. And if you go there, you could point to that list, and we'll be accepting those as well. And overall, any other costs that are related to the program that are reasonably necessary for the unit of local government to respond to the public health emergency, and it satisfy local cure program eligibility. One of the key things is local governments must document how expenses are related to COVID-19. And so as you're preparing expenditures and you're considering what types of expenses you would like covered by the program, you should be jotting down explanations on how it's attributed, because we'll be seeking that documentation along with receipts for the expenditures themselves. Things that are not eligible under the program are governmental revenue shortfall or revenue replacement. That's passed at the federal level. Damages covered by insurance. Once again, we're trying to not double dip on things that are already covered by other items, including insurance. Payroll or benefit expenses for employees whose work duties are not substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So if you have regular office employees that they might be spending a great deal of time answering phone calls, but if their job isn't entirely dedicated or substantially dedicated to mitigating and responding to the emergency, it's probably not a payroll cost that you could attest to being largely for your response to the public health emergency. Expenses associated with the provision of economic support is not included in the local cure program, but if you have economic support expenses that you would like claimed, I encourage you to engage us about the BIG program, the Business Interruption Grant Program. As I pointed to the website earlier, as well as the email, let's hear about the economic support plans that your village, county, or township is interested in. Reimbursement to donors for donated items or services are not reimbursable under the program. Workforce bonuses other than hazard pay or overtime are not claimable. So what that means is we can claim hazard pay, and we can claim overtime that you can attest was related to COVID-19. So a great example that actually Tony gave me the other day was there was a sanitary district that wanted to know if they can incur payroll expenses as related to COVID-19. Now, the regular employees aren't doing anything out of the normal to respond to COVID-19, but if the sanitary district needed to give folks hazard pay to encourage them to continue working and not stay home, the incremental change in cost from the base pay to including the hazard pay, that incremental change is what could be claimed. So if you were giving everyone a 5 or 10% bonus, it's that 5 or 10% that you'd be able to claim as COVID related. And so if you've incurred that cost as a local government, we are here to reimburse those expenditures. Local cure cannot cover severance pay. Local cure could also cannot cover legal settlements as well. So if there are some court battles related to the local government response to COVID-19 public health emergency, those aren't things that can be claimed under this program. Indirect costs and administrative costs are also not things covered under this program. We are running this as an expense reimbursement program, which I'll get into detail very shortly, and not a grant program. So you're not going to receive a typical grant that may have indirect or administrative costs associated with it. We are running an expense reimbursement program. So indirect costs, administrative costs of claiming these reimbursement are not eligible under the program itself. And then incurred expenses that have been or will be reimbursed in other state or federal funding opportunity, as I mentioned, the public assistance program or other directly related COVID-19 programs. Those are, we're looking to not permit the double claiming of those sorts of costs. So some of the top things about the local cure application process. Local cure is a reimbursement program. We are not using the state of Illinois uniform intergovernmental grant agreement. So if you have entered into a grant with the state before, we're not using that typical form. Instead, we're using a certification form, and it governs the process for the local government as well as the state and how you will seek reimbursement under the program. The process does not require registration in the GATA portal, so we're trying to find ways to reduce the barriers to participating in the program. We're making it much simpler by creating a certification document. We're going to pre-fill the certification document and send it to the local government to attest to, and that's how you begin your participation in the program. One thing to note is because funds under CRF cannot be given to businesses on the federally debarred list, we do need all local governments to have an active SAM.gov registration throughout the duration of the program. So going into the detail on the application process, based on rules that we filed or an application, Dceo would draft that certification document. Certification document will define the relationship your local government has with Dceo as well as a partner that we're going to end up using. Part of that definition will tell you how the claiming of reimbursements will happen as well as the process for it. So Dceo drafts a certification. We'll be sending those out in the next few weeks. We're working really hard at it right now. If you're a county, municipality, or a certified public health department, you don't need to apply to this program. We've already allotted funds based on rule for your unit of government, and we are using the contact information that we already have for you in the GATA system in order to reach out to you. If you think that information is stale, though, I do encourage you to contact us at ceo.cure@illinois.gov to make sure that we have the most up-to-date contact information. So if you, I noted right there, if you prefer contact information, go ahead and email us there. Otherwise, we'll use the GATA system. So before I'd said, based on a rule or application, we draft the certification. So I'll dive into the rules real quick. So under the rules, we had 3 different allotment groups. Allotment A is for counties and municipalities. You don't have to apply for assistance. The Illinois Administration Code for the rule allocates 80% of the program's assistance to counties and municipalities. And the assistance is published on our website and the amount that you'll receive. I went ahead and pulled it up here. The link is there, and the amounts, the not to exceed amounts by county are listed, and as you go further down by municipality as well. Allotment B is for certified local public health departments. Local health departments are part of the program, and just like counties and municipalities in the first allotment, they are getting their own distribution. And actually, let me back up for a minute. This 80% distribution here is based on the LGE formula that was provided to us by the Department of Revenue. And let me circle back to an example real quick. We know that there are some towns and villages that might border county lines. So an example that I keep going to is actually for the city of Aurora. Aurora is both in Kendall County and Kane County. So the calculation that we needed to make was, how do we attribute the Kendall County population to the program and not the Kane County population? We did that using the LGDF information, and we were able to determine that 6,000 people in Aurora's population can be attributed to the Kendall part of the city, and that's how we came up with the allocation for that. The certified local public health department allotment, this was based on a formula that is built by the Department of Public Health, and it is based on per capita as well as low income populations in the state to determine a fair allotment. And so we published that as well, and it indicates what amounts will go directly to the public health departments throughout the state. And that's for the local health departments there. The bucket C is, this is for all other local governments. So going back to the definition of the program, it's for all local governments in the state, and that's based on the Illinois Constitution. So there are lots of other local governments that are eligible for the program, but we couldn't fold them in to receive an allotted amount. It wasn't administratively feasible for that. And so if you're a fire protection district, a township, or a park district, or an other local government that's recognized by the Illinois Constitution, you'll need to apply for assistance under the program. And that application is open right now, and it will be open until July 17th. One key thing is the budget implementation bill for this year's budget, as well as the appropriation bill, it focused a lot on helping disproportionately impacted areas based on COVID cases. And so one of the things that happens within our application C group here is we are going to prioritize assistance to those local governments that apply for the C application if they fall within one of the disproportionately impacted areas. And these zip codes are ones that had a disproportionate amount of COVID cases, had a disproportionate amount of case rate, or the area, and in addition, if the area was considered high risk by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the CDC. We helped fold in those as well. So those zip codes will be getting preference and funding in the application C allotment. So after we've determined the certification amount based on either the rule or the application, we'll send the agreement to all the different local governments. And next is for the local governments to complete a request for reimbursement and send them to Dceo's partner to review. So we're in the procurement process. We're very close to getting a partner on board, and we'll be sending these agreements very soon. And the reimbursement process we are aiming to start on August 1st. And so if local governments can start considering reimbursable items, that way you're prepared to fill out the documentation, you'll be all set to start the program. So our partner will review the reimbursement requests and support documentation for eligibility. So we will be reviewing 100% of what you provide to us. The local governments will need to provide justification on how expenditures are related to COVID. Local governments will also need to attest to the reimbursement submission are true, accurate, and the costs have not been claimed through another emergency relief program as well. The next step is after that review has been done by our partner, Dceo will do a final review, and we will then submit the reimbursement claim to the Illinois Office of the Comptroller for reimbursement. As I said, our partner and us, we will be reimbursing 100%, we'll be reviewing 100% of the reimbursements and support documentation from the start. Our goal is to turn around reimbursements between 5 and 7 business days. But keep in mind, right at the start of the program, we could potentially have 1,200 local governments requesting reimbursement all at the same time. So we appreciate any patience you can have for us at the very start of the reimbursement period, but we hope that after that initial push for reimbursements and you're in more of a cadence of reimbursing on a monthly basis, we will be turning those around quicker than initially. So the goal is 5 to 7 business days. Something to note about the Office of the Comptroller, if you have already received payments from the Comptroller via direct deposit and you're set up for direct deposit there, it'll just go to your local government electronically in that manner. Otherwise, you'll get a paper check based on the information that you provide us in the W-9. We will be sending a W-9 with the certification. Last thing to note is our partner and us at Dceo will be providing technical assistance ongoing throughout the process. Our partner will be hosting at least one webinar to walk through the reimbursement forms and be able to answer questions. We're also wanting them to set up a dedicated page just for the technical assistance for the program itself. And we have a dedicated email address that you'd ask us questions at any time for the program. So now that I've kind of walked through the steps of the program, I've told a lot about how the program is set up. You might be thinking, how could we prepare to start? We haven't gotten our certifications yet. Well, the department is working on getting the certifications drafted and sent to you. The things that you can do leading up to when you could start sending us reimbursements is make sure your unit of local government is registered with SAM.gov. Make sure you review the U.S. Treasury guidance and those different FAQs. They seem to now be in a regular cadence of publishing a new FAQ just about every 2 weeks. And so keep on looking at those. You get ideas for other types of expenditures that you might need to claim within the program. We encourage you to look at the administrative rules for the program. I've linked them here, which is, this is a link from actually the Dceo website where we posted them. You could also view them in the JCAR website. I didn't link them here because there was a bit of a delay in getting them on the JCAR website, but they are effective as of July 2nd. And because they are emergency rules, they're good for 150 days. So something else you could do is start collecting receipts for COVID-19 related expenses and digitize them if you could. In this new work environment that we are all in, we are trying to do as much as possible via email. We are hoping that a secure portal will be set up where you could upload documents into the secure portal for review. And so you'll want to make sure those are digitized on the front end. We recommend PDFs. You know, if all you could do is a JPEG, snapping a picture of it, as long as it's clear, we think that'll work as well. You know, the expense document that we'll be sending around too will also need to be signed in some way. So if you have the Adobe signature or DocuSign or something like that, so you can affix the digital signature, that works. Or if you sign and scan it, that works as well. We'll want a signature in some way. We recommend that you start categorizing your expenditures by month, and we are hoping that we could submit multiple months of reimbursement claims all at once. So right when we start actually collecting reimbursements in August, you'll be able to claim stuff all the way back from March. So you've got all this time right now to start collecting that documentation and organizing it. Just last week, we got our reporting directive from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and we have to report to them that expenses happened in one of these categories here. And so it's important that as you are placing your expenses into different categories, you lump them into these groups, because these groups are what's going to be in our reimbursement document itself. Payroll, budgeted personnel services diverted to a substantially different use, improvement to telework capabilities for public employees, medical expenses, public health expenses, distant learning, and all items not listed. It's likely that when we are accepting an expense reimbursement for something that's not listed in this above list, that we will ask you to give in a description as well. So make sure you have that on hand. Lastly, we have set up just our tentative timeline for the program. So if you recall, by application or an allotment and rule, that's what we're deciding will be in the certification. Well, the application period for that other units of local government group has opened. So if you're a county, a municipality, or a city, you do not need to apply. You do not need to go out to the application and fill it out. But if you are not a county, municipality, or city, or public health department, you will have to apply for the program. And our open application is on the Dceo website, and the application closes on July 17th. Right after that, we'll be planning on hosting a technical assistance webinar with our partner to walk through the reimbursement process. Right now, that's targeted for July 29th, and we are aiming to begin the reimbursement period on August 1st. Another notable date in our tentative timeline is within our rules, we've allotted that on November 1st, there's an optional reallocation that can be done. And there's lots of questions around this, and I wanted to make sure I clear it up. Funds in this program can only be used for local government. We cannot reallocate these funds for different purposes. It has to be, we have to abide by the appropriated language as well as the programmatic language within the budget implementation bill. So no reallocation could possibly take money and put them elsewhere. And we indicate that we may reallocate because we're looking to direct funds where there still is an exhibited need. The example I've given to people is, if I were to give you $100 today and say, hey, you've got 12 months to spend this $100. And if you don't spend the $100 in 12 months, we need to give it to somebody else because they might need the $100. If I check in on you in 6 months and you've spent $50, we're in good shape. There's probably nothing additional that I need to do. But if I check in on you and you spent $5 out of $100, then we might need to have a conversation to find out, hey, is $100 too much? And then we talk about what sort of reallocation might be needed. That's the mechanism of this reallocation. If governments are continuing to report to us expenditures and you have made it clear in the reimbursement process that you've got ongoing expenditures, which that'll be built in, you have no fear for reallocation. We are looking to direct the expenses to where they're needed, especially if there's huge outbreaks somewhere in the state. We need to be able to respond to that. And then the last date on the timeline is December 30th. On an accrual basis, this is the final day that a cost may be attributed to the program. So your not to exceed number, it's good from the moment that we start the reimbursement process, August 1st, all the way through December 30th. And we just ask that if you have an expense, let's say you've got payroll for the second half of December, and those payroll vouchers take a little bit to get processed and everything, we're looking at when the cost was incurred. So costs incurred on December 30th, we would just need documentation on that shortly thereafter. We've set January 31st on when we would like those last of those reimbursements in, because we need to close down the federal program shortly after that. So that concludes the main content of my presentation. I've put up a couple emails here. ceo.cure@illinois.gov is where I recommend you ask questions about the program. And it just occurred to me I might not have actually navigated to the CURE website. So let me go to that too. And I'm available for questions. In a follow-up, I know that they were working on compiling questions from the webinar. But here's Dceo's website, and here's the link for the Business Interruption Grant Program, and then here's the link for the CURE program. So if you click here, I was saying to some folks earlier that we've updated this website probably 10 times since we posted it, because a question comes up, and I appreciate all the questions because it helps us give better information. And so we'll continue to post better information as we go. I'm hoping to post an exhaustive frequently asked questions document out here. I also encourage you to come out and keep an eye on the timeline. So as my team is also working remotely, dates might have to be adjusted because we're all human and we all need to care for ourselves and our friends and family first during this pandemic. So we appreciate everyone's patience throughout the program, and we appreciate everyone's participation in the program. So I'm available for questions if there are ones that were brought up during the presentation.
All right, thanks so much, Phil. We do have several questions that have come in, and I will start feeding those to you. If other people have questions, now's the time, put them in the chat box. All right, our first questions are about items that are coverable. Would the cost of a storage shed to house PPE required by Eema be reimbursable?
Yeah, I would see that as, and the reason why is because if you go back to the reimbursable checklist, that shed, if you needed to purchase it to house the PPE because you had nowhere else to put it, the local government wouldn't have spent those dollars on it. And so that's a good use of the funds. And as long as you have your receipts that you could provide to us and put them in a reimbursement and just simply document that, you should be good shape.
Great, thanks so much. Related question, how about laptops and VPNs for staff working from home?
That's a good one. I had a question that came through the email just the other day. I don't think I've had a chance to, actually I did respond to it. If your local government has incurred those costs and you see that as necessary for the public health emergency, and you see that as attributed to just COVID-19 and nothing else, and you could attest to that, then it can be reimbursed. But here's the thing, if your local government was already going to be moving to a remote work environment, even if the COVID-19 pandemic didn't happen, then the cost would not really be associated with it. But in most cases, we are trying to get folks to socially distance and be more conscious of their workspaces. So if you could attest that those expenses were incurred in order to respond to the public health emergency and create a better, safer work environment, I think those are things that you could attest to and say, yes, those are expenditures that can be made under the program.
Great. We have several payroll questions as well. Are townships required to declare public health emergencies as at a board meeting in order to qualify for a cures reimbursement? So do townships have to declare a public health emergency?
No, because the governor declared a public health emergency, and the governor has ordered subsequent stay-at-home orders. Some of the guidance that has been given by the Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as other public health agencies throughout the state, if you are abiding by those orders and you've incurred costs because you abided by those orders, those are all reimbursable expenditures. So your individual body doesn't need to have a special declaration because the larger jurisdiction is the state of Illinois, and that declaration has been made.
Great, thanks so much. How about if an employee is a budgeted employee, but they have been working substantially to mitigate and respond to COVID-19, is that payroll and benefit eligible?
Yeah, if that employee who's regularly budgeted is suddenly doing something completely outside of their job description and all they are doing is COVID-19 mitigation and public health, that's a reimbursable cost. That's an example of how a budgeted line is being used for a substantially different use.
All right, thanks. Is it correct that local health departments can use these funds for payroll expenses even if their staff are not directly working on COVID activities?
Yes. So that's one key thing with payroll. If there's a public health employee that's on your payroll, the U.S. Treasury has given some pretty broad guidance on being able to claim those expenses. And so we are also echoing that guidance in that if you had a public health employee, it's pretty reasonable to think that they are working on the pandemic and the local's response to it. So really, any individual that's public health related, you could claim those expenses as part of the program.
Great, thank you. Are payroll expenses incurred for employees directed to stay at home by a physician for possible exposure eligible for reimbursement?
I don't believe so, because the local government would have already had those payroll costs budgeted for, and those individuals aren't being redirected. Now, what can be claimed is if a physician told them to stay home and suddenly they're not doing their job, because they're home or they're sick. And if you had to hire contractors or hire additional staff to cover that work, those additional staff and those additional workers, that's the cost that can be claimed. Because if not for the public health emergency, you wouldn't have had to bring on additional people to cover those roles of folks that had to stay home. So that's how I'd explain that.
All right, that makes sense. This person is from both McHenry and Kane County and asks, since they're from both those counties, can we submit expenses to both counties if our total expenses exceed the combined allocation between CARES and CURE?
I'm not familiar with how Kane is running their program. We would just ask that expenses that you claim under our program are not double counting ones that are submitted to their program. And we are giving communities allocations based on their population that might have been in Kendall County, depending on where in the border you're talking about. And so you can claim those reimbursements to us and attest that, you know, this is on behalf of this allocation of our funds. We just ask that you not double count them with the other program. I hope that answers your question. If not, please email that address and we could have a better dialogue on it.
Okay. And somebody asked for clarification. Health departments do not have to apply by July 17th, and they will just receive certification and be able to start sending in expense requests, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And we've listed those individual health departments on our website, and this is based on the Illinois Department of Public Health reporting to us that these are the health departments that would fall into the jurisdiction for this program. So if the public health department that you're speaking of is listed here, they're part of the allocation. If they're not listed here, please, email the CURE email address to make sure that we're not missing anything.
All right. This person is from Kane County, and they ask, do we look to the county for funding options since we're not qualified for the CURE program?
Yeah, you would have to reach out to your county and find out what Kane County is doing for you. This is a statewide program using the statewide allocation of funds. And this particular program is looking at assisting local governments outside of Kane and the other collar counties. So unfortunately, I'd have to send you there for local government reimbursement. If the assistance that you need is not local government reimbursement related, and it might be something else that's related, a lot of these programs that the General Assembly and the governor passed, they do end up being statewide programs. Like we're giving mental health and substance abuse and counseling services statewide. So it just depends on the type of assistance you need. If it is an expenditure that you need reimbursed as a local government, unfortunately, I'd have to send you to Kane County. Okay.
Another listener asked, is the program the same as the one available through FEMA and managed locally by Eema? And there's a link here if you need that. So is it the same?
It's the allowable expenditures. In our conversations with Eema, the allowable expenditures are going to match up almost exactly. And so one of the items that we've discussed is that local CURE can be the match for the FEMA program, the public assistance program. So you couldn't submit reimbursements to both for the same thing, but here's an example. This is actually something that we were talking about. Let's say you took all of your COVID-related expenses for the month of March, and you detailed them all out, and you sent them to us and said, hey, we would like 25% of this reimbursed through the CURE program because we're going to get the 75% covered through the public assistance program. As long as we're documenting that in that process, that'd be a pretty effective way of doing it. That way you're not having to pick and choose expenditures that go here versus there.
Okay. The next question is about HVAC upgrades. Would those be something that would be reimbursable?
I'm not sure. That might be something that we might have to have additional dialogue on. I would kind of ask that they take a look at this checklist here, and if they can say true to all of these, then we're going to fold those expenses in. You know, because there might be regular maintenance that needs to be done in a building anyway, and so we can't suddenly say that, all right, the HVAC system needed replacing. Well, now we're going to attribute it as a COVID-19 cost. That seems a little bit of a stretch to me. Now, if there was some additional expenses related to social distancing or I have a hard time attributing that cost exactly. So I encourage that individual to follow up in an email so we can have additional dialogue if needed.
Okay. Next question is about clarifying Allotment A. Under that section, it states that local government does not have to apply. Would a municipality receive an allotment automatically or still have to show reimbursement expenses?
Yeah, the entirety of the program is reimbursement. We don't have authority to just give the funds out. We have to have local governments show us the expenditures. And so all of Allotment A, counties, municipalities, they have to sign the certification that we send you and then send us reimbursement documents, and we'll review them and cut you a check. The number that is in the certification that is decided by Allotment A is your not to exceed expenditure amount. So like Ashmore, Illinois, they can claim to the department up to $32,384 in reimbursements. That's the number that they can receive reimbursement up to. We're not cutting checks for these amounts. It's not a grant. We're not advancing dollars in the program.
Okay. Then next question is, what types of receipt is needed to receive payroll reimbursement?
If you have ever been audited, that's really what we would need. At my department, we provide both what's called three things, really. We provide a schedule, a detail, and then proof that it hit our general ledger. So the schedule being a roll-up of, Jane Doe, John Doe, everyone else, all rolling up into a total amount. So that'd be one thing. So and that schedule would ideally say payroll from date A to date B, and the total amount. The second part would maybe be the detail with the individual's names. We ask that social security numbers and things like that be redacted before they sent to us. So it's showing the detail of the individuals, and then a screenshot from your general ledger system showing that these expenditures actually came out of your local account. Those three things together would be adequate backup documentation, along with your statement in the reimbursement saying that the individuals named on this report, you could reference the report number, the document number, were all substantially dedicated to COVID-19 public health emergency, and that's why we're requesting reimbursement. If you set it up like that, we're pretty good to reimburse it.
All right. If we have a group of staff members that have the onset of the COVID-19 virus, they were asked to work from home for safety measures until such a time that PPE could be obtained. Can we claim those payroll expenses for those employees for the time that they were required to work from home?
No, I believe this is similar to a question that was brought up earlier. Those employees were all already budgeted expenses. You can't say that those expenses were substantially different than what you would have already incurred. You would have already incurred those payroll costs. But what you can incur is if you had other people that came in to do their job, you could cover those costs. You could also cover the cost of the PPE that you purchased for those individuals so they can come back to work.
Okay. Next question is, if the county chooses to continue paying staff, but it has them work from home because of COVID, can that salary be covered?
I mean, it's similar to the last question. I mean, if they're your regular employees, like your accountants and your fiscal administrators and your attorneys, and they're not working substantially dedicated to COVID, and their payroll that you already had budgeted, it cannot be claimed. Trying to receive a claim for that, it would be similar to trying to account for expenses as a revenue shortfall. So if you are short on revenue in order to make that payroll, unfortunately we can't cover it. I ask you to try to attribute payroll costs that are related to COVID. Look for your public health employees, look for your public safety employees, and fold those costs in. All
right, thanks. And sorry if we're repeating ourselves. I'm doing this on the fly, so sometimes I ask the same question. But this one is different. If townships, in parentheses, supervisors and trustees do not sign up for the program, could the assessor's office or the road district within those townships sign up strictly on their own?
If those individual entities under the township are their own local government and are a special taxing district and are recognized by the Illinois Constitution as a local government, then they can apply. But unfortunately, if those groups all are under the purview of that township, it's up to that township to apply on behalf of. And we were trying to avoid the sort of situation that's part of actually how we set up the program. We were trying to avoid counties having to reimburse municipal costs and municipalities having to reimburse, fire protection districts. So really the eligible applicants are the individual bodies that are a local government as defined by the Illinois Constitution.
All right. Another listener asks, our budget year didn't start until May 1st, which means that none of our budgetary expenses for 2021 were allocated by 3/27/2020. Therefore, would our police/EMS payroll be eligible?
It's hard to say that regular payroll would be eligible if they were already budgeted for, but in many cases, those police and the EMS are responding to the public health emergency. So if those folks are responding to the public health emergency, we'd look to fold those costs in.
Okay. Would reimbursement be available for budgeted employees who work on the Dceo grant on behalf of a business, like the Downstate Small Business Stabilization, based on the hours they spent on grant writing?
Those costs seem like something that would be attributed to the grant itself, and not this particular program.
Okay. Next listener asks, where do we receive the certification from? Or where will we receive the certification from?
Yeah, Dceo is drafting the certifications, and we will send them out to your point of contact. So in many cases, the point of contact that we are seeking is the one that's listed in GATA. I can't remember what slide I mentioned that on, but if you think that your GATA contact might be stale and not updated in a while, please email us. Let us know what governmental body you are, and we will make sure it gets to the right person. We're trying to set this up so we fill out the certification ahead of time, we send it to you, you review it, you sign it, you return it, and we're rolling. We're trying to avoid having to pass a document back and forth, negotiate on a scope. A lot of the things that are in a typical grant template, we're trying to avoid a lot of that back and forth and some of those red tape type items here.
All right, great. If a health department is part of a county government and the LHD allocation doesn't cover all of their reimbursement costs, can the county government use their allotment and request those funds for reimbursement?
As long as the that health department is under the jurisdiction of the county, yeah.
Okay.
And as long as we're accounting that they are not being double counted in some way, yeah, those could be attributed.
Okay. All right. If the county is allocated to receive $500,000 in allocation A, that money is only sent to the level of expenses. Let me figure this out. If the county is allocated to receive $500,000 in allocation A, that money is only sent to the level of expenses sent to Dceo for reimbursement. So I think they're asking, do they get all the money, or do they have to submit all the receipts to that dollar value?
Yeah, they'd have to submit receipts up to that dollar value.
Okay.
Throughout the entire period from March 1st to December 30th.
Okay. Employee salaries were budgeted. However, to preserve the health of our workforce and mitigate exposure, there was an MOU between the body and the employees to set half of the workforce to work from home and or be on call during the outbreak. Would the employee wages that were sent home with pay be covered?
Once again, those were.
Yeah, I think this is.
Yeah, once again, those are budgeted expenditures. Those folks were already going to be on payroll for the local government, and and so I try to find ways. I'm trying to do my best to, fold costs in, but unfortunately, if it's not public health or COVID related, we couldn't. So.
Okay. How about law enforcement payroll hours to assist public health officials to enforce COVID rules?
That's definitely attributable.
Okay. Back to the HVAC question. If someone is creating a negative pressure room within a clinic, would something like that qualify?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than just changing out the air conditioning. So, yeah.
All right. Looks like somebody else is asking if HVAC was changed to a negative pressure specifically for a jail setting to have measurements in place. This is not a regularly scheduled or projected upgrade.
Yeah, if it's not a regularly scheduled or projected upgrade, and you would not have been incurring those costs if not for the public health emergency, it sounds like you are putting in public health measures. And so if your government foots that bill to start with, we will reimburse it under this program. On things that are really detailed like that, please email us, and then that way, if there's any question on whether you should go out and spend your local dollars on it and then seek reimbursement, that make sure we've had a dialogue on it, and so it's made clear. Thanks.
Okay. Someone else asks, can you explain hazard pay? Can we retro back and give hazard pay to our nursing staff?
So hazard pay, I'm not a human resources individual, so I don't know the exact definition of hazard pay, but from what I gather, it's a kind of a bonus in order to afford people additional consideration because they've been putting themselves on the front line and everything. So we're eligible to reimburse things back to March 1st. And so if you have given hazard pay out of your local accounts, we can reimburse that. And so if you do it retroactively to March 1st, I don't see any reason why we couldn't seek reimbursement and do reimbursement for that. So.
All right. I'm just scanning through here to see what we've covered. Are attorney fees that is listed as COVID, are they eligible to be submitted?
It kind of towing the line for, it's not legal settlements. That's not, I can't say yes right now.
Okay.
We'd need some backup documentation for something like that. Because if their legal fees were related to an ongoing settlement or a legal battle related to COVID, we can't cover those costs. Yeah, I have to ask for them to email follow up on that one, please.
Okay. For allocation A, for areas that use much less, if an area uses less of that money, will that money be reallocated to other municipalities who need more?
Yes, that's the idea of the November 1st date. We're not going to simply pull the plug on the not to exceed number if your local government continues to have need for expenses. But in my example earlier, if I gave someone $100 today and said you have 12 months to spend it, and I come to you 6 or 8 months down the road and you've only spent 5, I'm going to seek to give that some portion of those dollars to someone else that's in need. You know, this is a statewide program. We are trying to respond at a state level to the local government expenses as they happen. We can't tell right now where COVID-19 outbreaks are going to happen. And so different local governments might badly need these funds later on down the road.
All right, I think in the interest of time, we are going to end there. Nancy will be putting up a poll really quickly. We would like to have you tell us how much you learned and the information you have available. For those of you whose questions did not get answered, Tony and Phil have requested that we send them all of these questions, and they will add that to their Q&A. Certainly, as Phil has mentioned, if you have specific questions, they presented the email addresses, and you can certainly share those. So let me find I lost my script as to what was coming next. There we go. Next week, we're offering 2 webinars on the fiscal and economic outlook for the state with respect to the pandemic. And we are expecting, and we are welcoming an expert on racial equity in local government, public agencies, and public services. If you visit the local government education website, you'll have more information and you can register. So at this point, let me thank my speakers heartily. This was a wonderful session, and thank all of you who joined us today.